Let me tell you about a turning point in my life that happened when I was 27. I had what seemed like a perfect life on paper, a creative position at a software company in Florida, a steady income, and a promising career ahead of me. But beneath that polished surface, my home life was crumbling like a house of cards. It all started a year ago, when my father's company suddenly declared bankruptcy, a shock that none of us saw coming. That devastating news forced me to move back home to support my parents and my younger sister, Christine. Our entire family became dependent on my income, a responsibility that weighed on my shoulders like a heavy stone. One evening, an incident crystallized everything that was wrong with our situation. My mother casually mentioned that Christine wanted pork chops for dinner the next day. I couldn't help but let out a weary sigh as I reminded her that we could barely afford groceries, let alone pork chops. With furrowed brows, I pointed out that we had already exhausted our food budget, and we weren't even halfway through the month. That's when Christine chimed in, her voice dripping with entitlement, saying I wasn't providing enough money for food. I felt like I'd been slapped in the face. I reminded her that I was already giving them $1,000, which should have been more than sufficient. Christine scoffed, claiming that with today's prices, $1,000 wasn't enough for a family of 4. My frustration finally boiled over, and I snapped, asking why she couldn't find a job and help with the expenses herself. My mother immediately jumped to Christine's defense, lamenting how difficult it was to find work and how sorry she felt for my sister. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth as I watched this familiar scene unfold. Christine was using job hunting as an excuse while doing nothing but lounging around all day. To make matters worse, I had discovered that my mother was secretly giving Christine pocket money from the funds I provided. Finally, I'd had enough and suggested selling the house and moving back to my grandmother's hometown. I thought it could be a fresh start, new job opportunities, lower cost of living. But my mother shot down the idea immediately, adamantly refusing to return to that town. My grandmother ran a successful Italian restaurant in Miami, where we could work and at least have free pizza and pasta. Life would be easier there, but my grandmother was known for being strict. She was particularly demanding about pizza making, which was why my mother despised the idea of working there. My father would often say, with an air of pride that felt misplaced to me, that we should be independent instead of running to grandmother for help, calling it nothing but dependency. I wanted to scream in frustration at the irony of being called dependent when I was the one paying for everything while my sister refused to work. Christine was 25 years old enough to find a part-time job like countless others who work while searching for full-time employment. When I suggested this, my mother rushed to defend Christine, claiming she was too busy helping with housework to take on a part-time job. I could hardly believe my ears. What housework was she talking about? I had never seen Christine do any meaningful chores around the house. That's when my father jumped in, stating that Christine carried dishes to the sink after meals, occasionally did laundry, and sometimes gave him shoulder massages. The anger rose inside me, like a pot about to boil over. The chores my father mentioned were things a small child could handle. Meanwhile, I was waking up early every morning to prepare breakfast for the whole family and pack my father's lunch. On top of that, I managed the household finances and handled all the tax paperwork. Yet my parents consistently favored Christine, just as they had since we were children. People called me pretty too, but Christine was always considered a graceful, charming one. That's why they always gave her special treatment. You might think I should just walk away from this situation, but it's not that simple. Moving out isn't an easy option. So I lived with this stress day after day, like a weight I couldn't put down. One day, time slipped by, and I didn't notice that my sister had left the house. I assumed she was out as usual, but she didn't return the next day, or the day after that. I began to grow suspicious. Then one evening, as I was heading to my room, I overheard my parents talking in the living room. What I heard stopped me in my tracks. My mother was eagerly anticipating souvenirs from Louisiana. She was gushing about how lucky Christine was, relaxing on beautiful beaches and dining in fancy restaurants. My father chimed in, saying he wanted to go to Louisiana too, suggesting we should all go next time. I couldn't stay quiet anymore, and burst into their conversation, asking in confusion if they were saying Christine was in Louisiana right now. My parents looked at me in surprise, confirming that yes, she was. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could she afford it when she had no money? Then I got the shocking call from my credit card company about large charges over the past 4 days. I knew I hadn't made any significant purchases. With growing anxiety, I asked how much had been spent, and the customer service representative told me it was $20,000 in just 4 days. I instantly knew who was behind this. It had to be Christine, living it up in Louisiana. She might have possibly won hotel stay vouchers and plane tickets, but she would still need money for souvenirs and other expenses. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I called her directly. "What's going on? Explain yourself," I demanded. Her response was infuriatingly casual, expressing surprise at my call and joking about bringing me souvenirs. "Stop wasting time. You used my credit card without permission, didn't you?" She showed absolutely no remorse. "Oh, you noticed?" she said indifferently, making my blood boil even hotter. I should have realized sooner that someone had been going through my belongings. What were you thinking? Using someone's credit card without permission is a crime. She brushed it off, saying, "Well, it would be a problem if it was someone else's card, but we're family. Allison, you should really learn about these things." She actually had the audacity to lecture me. "How did you manage to spend $20,000 in just 4 days? That's an astronomical amount." She casually explained that besides the free flight and hotel she won, she had to pay for activities, shopping, and meals, dining at fancy restaurants, buying designer brands, taking taxis, until she'd spend over $20,000. "You can't spend money like this, Christine. What were you thinking? Why are you so angry? The card was about to expire anyway." "I'll leave the bill to you, sis," she said cheerfully before hanging up. I was speechless. Everything had happened so fast. Afterward, Christine kept trying to contact me, but I ignored her calls. Finally, she left a voicemail saying, "Well, I guess I messed up this time. I'm such an idiot." Her utter lack of self-awareness was so absurd I could only laugh. Later that night, when I got home, my parents rushed to meet me. When I walked in, my mother immediately started in about how calm I seemed while Christine was in such a difficult situation. "Why did you cancel the card?" "She's in trouble," she demanded. "So what? She used my card without permission. Of course I canceled it," I replied firmly. I explained that as soon as the credit card company called about charges I didn't recognize, I immediately canceled the card. Christine had panicked when she tried to use the card and found it blocked. When I continued to ignore her, she finally turned to our parents for help. They confronted me, asking how I could leave my sister stranded on her trip. I kept repeating that being family doesn't make it okay to steal $20,000 using someone's credit card. "You shouldn't be so cold," my mother scolded. "This is why you never get to go on trips yourself." Christine was planning to buy souvenirs with the card. "What's wrong with that?" my mother persisted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You two are unbelievable. How can you think this way? Are you sleepwalking through life? You need to think clearly about this. She's out there having fun and thinking of us? And you still claim she's being considerate. Considerate? Can you still say that after hearing this? I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail Christine had left. Her voice rang out loud and clear, "Make the card work again, you miser. Mom and Dad's cards are maxed out and I can't use them. You're being so stingy, you won't even give me money for this trip. You're such a useless sister." After hearing Christine's angry message, my parents fell silent. Their anger vanished quickly as they rushed to their room to check their credit cards. Minutes later, I heard panicked screams. When I went to check on them, their faces were red with rage. "I can't believe Christine used our cards without asking. After everything we've done for her," my father fumed. "She even took our bank book and cards." "I feel so betrayed," my mother added. "Oh," I responded coldly, "wasn't this Christine's kind gesture? Didn't you just say she was thinking of us and trying to have fun?" "Yes, that's what we thought, but our money is still safe, right?" my mother mumbled anxiously. Watching their attitudes change the moment they realized their own money was at stake, I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Well, why don't you increase your card limits and pay the balance so she can use them again? For sweet Christine who's trying to buy us souvenirs?" I suggested sarcastically. "That's impossible," my mother said, "we don't have any savings. What are we going to do about Christine stranded there without money for food?" After the chaos, my father suddenly turned to me. "Allison, please. Let's start over. We promised to work together to support this family. Please help Christine." "What are you talking about? Now you want to include me?" I asked sarcastically. Moved by my father's words, my mother knelt before me. I was shocked for a moment, but then couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "It's a little late for apologies," I said, but my mother continued to plead earnestly. "I swear we'll change. From now on, we'll do everything to support everyone. We'll never hurt you or Christine again." I couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of the situation. While my parents returned to their room, I quietly took out a credit card. Though still unsure of my next move, I secretly prepared an unused credit card that hadn't expired. "How about we give this card to Christine and take a family trip?" I suggested. My parents were excited by the idea and immediately contacted my sister, with everyone eagerly starting preparations. I watched them with a smile as I booked the flights to Louisiana online. After everything was arranged, I made a phone call to a certain number. 5 days later, when my parents and sister returned from Louisiana, Christine greeted me. "Thanks for letting us enjoy Louisiana, sis. It's rare for you to come pick us up. Were you expecting souvenirs?" "Sorry, I didn't buy any." It was clear they'd had a wonderful time and had already forgotten to thank me for my help. Seeing this, I knew it was time to put my plan into action. I could barely contain my excitement. "Looks like you had fun. Was that the last great moment of your life?" I asked. "What do you mean, last?" Christine asked, confused. "Well, I've decided to sell the house," I said indifferently. "I've already sent your belongings to the new place, and someone will be coming to pick you all up." My parents and sister were completely shocked. They noticed the "for sale" sign at the entrance of our house. "What? What is this? You sold the house? What's going on?" they asked, their expressions dumbfounded. I explained. "Actually, a realtor I know from college has been interested in this property and asked me to sell both the house and land together. I've always refused until now because I thought there was meaning in staying here. But I recently changed my mind. I realized that selling this house and living alone again would give me both financial and mental freedom. My parents protested, "You can't sell the house on your own. That's illegal. This house belongs to us, not you." I calmly responded, "Oh. You seem quite upset. But what if the house and land were actually in my name?" "What?" they exclaimed in disbelief. "Dad, remember when you couldn't pay the taxes and came to me for help? I agreed to pay on the condition that the house ownership would be transferred to my name. You signed those papers, remember?" My father's face crumbled as the memory suddenly came rushing back. "Oh, that's right." I continued my explanation. "The reason I didn't move out was because the house was already in my name. I was waiting for the right time to evict everyone and sell it. It was difficult to find an opportunity, since you were always home. But when I sent you all to Louisiana, my chance finally came. While the house was empty, I could proceed with the sale." Everyone was in shock. "What? You're lying." I calmly continued, "As I said before, your belongings have already been sent to the new place, so don't worry. The truck will be here soon to pick you all up." "What do you mean?" my mother asked, still confused. "Grandmother is waiting for all of you. She's looking forward to seeing you," I said with a smile. "Wait, grandmother? You mean Mom?" my father asked with a trembling voice. "Yes, I talked to her, and she agreed to take you all in. She's eager to bring you back to your senses. She even told me to send your luggage. Better get ready to make pizzas and clean every day at her restaurant." My parents and Christine were dumbfounded. "I don't want to go to grandmother's house," Christine screamed. "Well, that's up to you. But how do you plan to survive with no house and no job? And don't forget about the credit card bill. How are you going to pay it?" "What are you talking about?" my mother asked nervously. "You thought the card was in my name? You should have been more careful. The card is in someone else's name." "No way." My mother's face turned pale as she took out the card to check. Her eyes widened in shock. "Wait, this card is in Christine's name?" "That's right. The credit card I gave you was one I found in Christine's room. It was her first card when she started working, but she quit soon after and never used it." "Oh no. I've spent too much. What should we do?" My mother panicked. "Well, since the card is in Christine's name, she'll have to pay it. And you'll all need to work hard at grandmother's place to cover your living expenses without causing any trouble." Though Christine resisted until the end, my parents realized they had no choice and silently waited for grandmother's arrival. When she came, they all headed to her house and restaurant in Miami. Under grandmother's strict supervision and with help from veteran employees, they learned to work hard, often through tears. The $23,000 charged to Christine's card was repaid under grandmother's watchful eye. While I had planned to resolve everything by selling the house, grandmother helped me recover the living expenses I'd been paying and even arranged for part of my parents' wages to go toward repaying me. I moved to an apartment near my workplace and started living alone again. My new life was going well, and I began enjoying peaceful days. One evening, as I stood on my balcony, watching the twilight city, I felt relief from the pressure I'd endured for so long. Yet, I also felt a touch of loneliness. Just then, my phone rang, and I hesitated seeing grandmother's name on the screen. "Hello, grandmother," I answered. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm fine," I replied. "That's good," she said. "I wanted to talk about Christine and your parents. They're starting to change. Especially Christine, she's working very hard now. Your parents are beginning to reflect on things too. Allison," she continued, I know how difficult this has been for you. I think I understand how you feel. Family can feel like a burden sometimes, but it's something we need to support. I hope someday you'll be able to forgive them." As I listened to grandmother's words, I could hear the hesitation and concern in her voice, but also a strong sense of determination. "There's no rush," she said gently. "Take your time and think about it when you're ready." Though she couldn't see me, I responded, "I understand, grandmother. I'll take my time and think about everything," before quietly ending the call. As I gazed at the city, the sun sank below the horizon as darkness slowly spread across the sky. A mix of emotions washed over me. While anger and sadness still lingered, I could see a small glimmer of hope for the future. Back in my room, my eyes were drawn to an old family photo. In it, a young Christine and I smiled together with our parents. Looking at those happy faces, I couldn't help but remember the joyful days we'd shared in the past. If only we could go back to those times, I thought, but reality quickly pulled me back. As time passed, my life began to find a more comfortable rhythm. At work, I was assigned to lead a new project, and my personal life started feeling more fulfilling. One night after finishing work, my phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. I hesitated but decided to answer. "Hello, this is Allison." "It's me, Christine," came a voice unlike her usual confident tone. It was softer, more uncertain. Surprised, I asked, "Christine, what's wrong? Did something happen?" "I'm sorry for calling suddenly," she began. "I want to meet in person." "I need to talk to you," Christine said in a small voice. Her voice carried a humility and maturity I'd never expected from her. "Why do you want to meet?" I asked quietly, waiting for her response. Though Christine's voice trembled, it was steady and sincere, showing how much she had changed. "I want to apologize. From the bottom of my heart. I feel like a phone call isn't enough to express my feelings. That's why I want to meet in person and apologize properly, truly." Her words felt genuine. I listened silently. "If it's too hard for you to meet, that's okay. I just want to respect your feelings," Christine continued. After a moment of silence, I finally answered. "All right. Let's meet at the cafe near the station next Saturday at 3 p.m. "Really? I'm so happy." "Thank you," Christine responded, sounding relieved. After hanging up, I took a deep breath to organize my thoughts. Though I wasn't sure if meeting her was the right decision, deep down I hoped it would lead to something positive. On the day of our meeting, I arrived at the cafe earlier than planned. As I sat there, my heart was racing with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The clock seemed to move slowly, but finally the cafe door opened and Christine walked in. She looked different. Her face was without makeup, her clothes were simple, and especially her eyes showed real change. She slowly approached my table, and immediately began apologizing. "I'm so sorry." In that moment, I sensed the change in her, and for a second, I didn't know how to respond. "Christine," I began, but she continued speaking through her tears. "Working at grandmother's house made me realize how much I depended on you. For years, I took you for granted. You always put us first, never thinking of yourself. I finally understand how hard that must have been." As tears streamed down her face, she reflected on her actions and apologized, repeatedly, from her heart. Christine spoke about her previous dependence on me, and the lessons she'd learned while working at grandmother's house. She was candid about her relationship with our parents and how she had grown. I listened to her words in silence. With each word, I felt the anger and sadness I'd harbored for so long begin to fade. As she continued speaking, I could feel the heavy emotions within me starting to dissolve. Thank you, Christine. I take your words seriously, I said. Afterward, we spent several hours talking about what was happening in our lives and the challenges we faced. This honest conversation felt like an important step in repairing our relationship. As we were about to leave, Christine handed me an envelope filled with gratitude. Inside was money she had earned working hard at grandmother's house. This is just the beginning. But I'll keep doing my best, she said. When I took the envelope, I could feel how much she had grown, and it warmed my heart. Months later, I visited grandmother's house again and met with my parents. This time they offered sincere apologies, and I could see they had changed, just like Christine. That night, we had dinner as a family for the first time in a long while. I felt the warmth of being with family again. I knew I couldn't forgive everything immediately. But seeing my family's efforts to change gave me hope for the future. Before I left, grandmother shared some wise words with me. Allison, you've become strong. But no matter how important that strength is, don't forget the kindness that's still within you. That's the most important thing. When grandmother hugged me, I couldn't contain my emotions and tears began to flow. I felt this was the beginning of a new chapter with my family, and the weight in my heart began to lift.